Welcome back to your one-stop shop for all your energy drink reviews. We are the absolute best. We're the Bev Boys. I'm Brian,
I'm Christian, and like
and
you
of
said, we're the
course,
bad
just like
boys.
we're the Bev Boys. Um, got some news, got some topics that we want to talk about today. But I did last episode. I mentioned that I had something, and we haven't reviewed it. We haven't reviewed something in this kind of category yet. But I was able to get my hands on it on the flavor that I did like a little bit more too. And so today, no caffeine. No caffeine for
Cool.
the boy. Instead, a little hydration.
Okay.
A little hydration. It's honestly not priced bad. It's a little bit more than a Gatorade. Like about 45, 50 cents more, which like it just depends on what you want. I think this has a higher quality level of ingredients in it, to be quite honest. So if like this would probably be a little bit more on like the pricing side. In between a Gatorade and one of the Gator Lights, where the Gator Lights are like 450, Gatorade's like $3. I think this was like
Mhm.
350 ish. Um, so not bad. Bottle looks sick. A little bit of like a obviously on brand with Ghost. They have just like their energy drinks, the color swap on there, whatever they need. As you can see, zero caffeine at the top. 996, so almost a total of 1,000 milligrams of total electrolytes. 500 milligrams of Aquamin, which is essentially a hydration supplement in there. 50 milligrams of Synactin, 100% daily value of your vitamin D and C, 100% daily value of vitamin B12 as well. And that's in the entire bottle. Zero sugar, zero caffeine. On the electrolyte side, this is where it gets kind of cool. I'm a little sad because it's only 40 milligrams of sodium. I, of course, love the sodium mix. I wish if this had 500 milligrams of sodium, I'd be super happy. I get why they did it this way. And it's mainly less for, I don't want to say like athletes versus non-athletes, but it's more so for the actual like fitness side and like the lifters who already probably have a ton of salt, or are cutting back on salt for water retention, as they kind of cut. But 700 milligrams of potassium, that's huge. And this is where I kind of said that potassium's a little sweet. So some of these get a little bit sweeter. 126 milligrams of magnesium, also great. Like magnesium is such a big one that everybody forgets about. I think that's the sickest one. 70 milligrams of chloride, 60 milligrams of calcium, 40 of sodium, obviously, and then the seaweed extract that is Aquamin, that's 500 milligrams, and then the Synactive, which is essentially Rosa Rembergia extract. Help you get to that absorption on there. But really excited to do this in front of you, but as officially, I got to put my mic down because I have to pop that top.
That's right.
Mm,
Was that it?
that was it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not
It
carbonated,
is a
so
bottle, yeah. It's not
yeah, it's
carbonated,
true.
but like it smells immediately like the OG yellow Gatorade. Like that's
Okay,
what I want.
nice.
Like I want you to picture that in your head.
Yeah. And for the people that aren't watching this on YouTube or watching it on Spotify, this is the Ghost hydration drink. I don't know if we
Yep.
say that lemon lime flavor, citrus flavor.
Yep. So Ghost Hydration, lemon lime. It tastes like a little bit more of a sweetened, but not like sugary, if that makes sense. Yellow Gatorade. Like that's
Okay.
the flavor profile. It definitely tastes like more naturally sweet. I think that's from the potassium, a little bit, but it's not like you still have like the tartness of the lime and the lemon of like that citrus fruit. It's definitely not like insanely like overly sweet that it's like, oh, this would make me sick to my stomach. Like I'll put it this way, if like I'm running and say like it's a super hot day, you're running like long tempos at something where you need something mild on the stomach, this is going to be great. It's still going to do its justice right there.
So
And
you'd
the
say
other
it's
aspect of it,
a little bit less sweet than like a prime hydration.
much less
Or
sweet,
okay, because
much
I know
less sweet
those
than a
are
prime.
super sweet in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I would say this is. It tastes a little bit, like I said, a little bit more natural and a little bit more sweet, but like naturally sweetened. than a yellow Gatorade. It doesn't have that like sugary like film on your tongue. Um, like I said, super hot day. You could pound this thing during a workout and not feel like you're gonna throw it up or get stomach or gut rot. But honestly, like even just sitting here, it's also just like a great tasting kind of drink.
Right.
So far, big fan.
Nice. Dude, while we're on the topic, why you mentioned Gatorade, what's your favorite Gatorade flavor?
So there's like a theory like of how trashy you are when you say the flavor or the color. And I was gonna say
Yes,
I
try
was
to
gonna
think of
say
colors, like all
yeah,
purple,
like
red.
dark blue, or like the purple, which would be clear
Grape.
blue, or the
And
Frost Riptide Rush.
oh, I forgot about the Riptide Rush. Yeah.
Or Rainberry. Do you remember Gatorade Rain?
Yes, like the light purple, like kind of like a
Yeah,
magenta.
they were all like kind of clear.
Yeah, those were
Yeah,
gas. I remember that.
love those.
Yeah, those were good. The yellow I feel like is classic.
Well, the yellow's so good. So was the orange. I love the orange Gatorade.
Orange. Dude, they had like a green apple one at one point. That was pretty
That
fire.
was good.
Um,
The only one I hate, and this is a hot take, red Gatorade. Fucking
I was
disgusting.
gonna say like the red, like I feel like the red is the most common, but it's like I
Gross.
can drink it, like, but it's not like my favorite, you know.
I hate red Gatorade, and I hate the light blue.
The cool blue
Yeah,
or whatever it's
not
called.
cool blue. Yeah, whatever it.
Like the
Arctic
Glacier
Blue.
Freeze or whatever
Glacier
it
Freeze.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah, that one's
I
alright.
hate that one.
Not a huge fan. Yeah, I think like that Riptide Rush one was gas.
Oh,
I know they
so
had
good.
I know they had like a strawberry one that I thought was pretty solid. They made it in a Gatorade Zero, which was even better.
Yes. There was one that was like cucumber melon that was kind of gross.
Yeah,
Like you could
anytime.
do it.
Yeah, you're playing with fire when you're talking about throwing like vegetable like
Yeah.
stuff
The one
into drinks.
the only melon one I did like, Powerade had like that really green melon flavor.
That's right.
That
Like
was
neon
gas.
green almost. Yeah, that
That
was
was
good.
absolute
See,
gas.
I forget about Powerade. I forget about Powerade. No, I think
I think
the classic for Gatorade, like yellow and purple. Honestly, for me,
oh
out
yeah.
of like the classic flavors, orange is solid too.
Out of the classics, like yellow is so good. Just
Yeah,
the regular purple, like the old school like grape one,
yeah,
unreal.
yeah. Powerade though kind of goes under the radar, underrated. Like I feel like they're orange and also yellow, very good, and that
Their
melon
their
one, gas.
their grape is fantastic. Their blue is awesome.
Yeah, I
Blue
think their blue's
Powerade.
way better than blue Gatorade.
Yeah, of course. Like I don't like other than like the fruit punch because I just don't like fruit punch. Like Powerade doesn't miss on a flavor. They're they have like a white one too.
Like the Glacier, like the white cherry or whatever it
Yeah,
is.
it's like a white cherry. Super good. Powerade's so underrated.
I know.
How how does it it gets brushed underneath the rug? I think it's strictly from like the branding standpoint, but it's still sick. And like the little P, that like drop P, that reminds me of just like the 2000s, like just going to like McDonald's and getting a XL blue Powerade, like when you're driving. It was so good. Oh no, may have lost him. May have lost the boy here. I'm gonna rip. Well, everybody, I don't know if Christian's still here. I can't really see him. He's kind of frozen at the moment, but in some of the sports nutrition, energy drink stuff inside the world right now, I'm gonna riff while Christian reloads back in. Red Bull has done something amazing. They've released essentially a naturally sweet. Oh, he's back. Let's go. He's back.
Sorry guys, power went out real quick. Had to connect to my hotspot on my phone. But yeah,
No, you're
the
good.
P
You're
reminds
good.
me of the
I was
2000s too.
just
That was the
riffing.
last thing I heard.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the 2000s, like just seeing like a basketball commercial with like the big baggy shorts.
Yep.
Um, but while you were out, I started to announce something because I had to keep the people entertained. But in the sports nutrition world,
Sorry, just cracking a little ice here, on the
okay,
citrus theme for the day.
there's some news in the sports nutrition energy drink world. Number one, obviously, some people are starting to see them come out. I actually got to taste one, very small sip, but I'm trying to get my hands on one so we can review it. We teased this on our Instagram. C4 has Jolly Rancher flavors. There's a blue raz and there is a sour green apple Jolly Rancher flavor. Let me tell you, I got a little tiny sip of the green apple. Absolute gas. Absolute gas. I am going to be trying to get my hands on those so we can do a review. And I don't know if you've seen this, Christian, but Red Bull has just announced a new Red Bull Zero. And the goal of it
Hmm,
is it's sweetened with monk fruit. And the idea is that it goes back towards like the original Red Bull flavor, um, versus like being a little bit more acidic with like some of the sucralose and everything like that. So I'm really hyped to try that out. And like you'll notice if you do get one of those cans, it'll say like sweetened with monk fruit around the top of the lid, near the actual like opening for the mouth. So very, very cool. Want to get my hands on that as well. And then obviously Monster has a new flavor out as well with the Hawaiian, it's like Hawaiian Blue Sunrise or something like that. Can looks sick. It's a zero calorie energy drink, just like the Ultra Zero line. And apparently that's like a blue raz type of flavor, and that should be hitting the stores very, very soon. Um, if not by the time that this comes out, it should be out. So all those should be coming to shelves near you.
nice. Yeah, those Jolly Rancher ones sound pretty gas.
Uh, I've heard good things about the blue one. If the blue one is half as good as the green one, it'll be gas.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh yeah.
yeah, you said you had a couple topics in the sports and performance side of things. So
Yeah. So this was just something I was kind of thinking about, and it took me back to something that I think it was you had a phone call with Andrew. So Andrew Benham, he used to work at Elon. He's the boy at Virginia baseball now, killing it. And I remember he asked you like, hey, do you think like the stuff that we're doing now in training will be considered old school one day? Basically, like how we look at some stuff that we do now as different than stuff that was done, X amount of years ago. And we're like, oh, that's old school. Oh, this coach is old school. They're old school, this and that. Do you think the stuff that we do now that we think is, new school and like obviously we think is more optimal for training and performance, do we think that that'll be looked at as old school, 20, 30 years down the line? And I think it kind of really plays into, I think I think you said this as well. Like the methods might be different, but the underlying principles will probably be the same. And that's kind of what I was just thinking about. Like, damn, like it's real easy with all the information out there in performance to overcomplicate stuff when like thinking about training. But really, you can simplify it and make it a lot easier on yourself if you just come back to basic principles. And I think um, I think at like Elon, especially like within the internship manual and like the 8 vector book itself, just like lining out those principles. And like, if you have those in place, the methods are kind of subject to personal preference, skill of the athlete, etc. So I just kind of want to talk about like, what are the differences between like, do you have the same principles as, would you say, Nick? And like, what are the differences between like principles and like qualities? Because I think some people can kind of get those confused. Like, oh, like speed is one of our principles, strength is one of our principles. Like, yes and no. To me, that's more of like a biomotor quality that you're training through, like that you're targeting,
mhm.
and then principles come first. So, just kind of wanted to do a bounce ideas off around that topic.
Yeah, and I I want to start this off by saying, like, I see where you're coming from, and with this question, it is a really thought provoking one. Um, if you take it at surface level, and I think the way I answered Andrew was, like you said, the methods might change, but the principles are going to stay the same. We're still going to chase those same kind of principles. So, like 3D movement patterns, ground based qualities, movement competency, things like that before we start to train, true biomotor qualities. And we can still train those along with those. So, like your speed, your explosive power, right? But we want to be able to do the requisite things prior to doing it. So, that's super, super big. And in 30 years, we might look back and say, hey, these were all outdated methods. But at the time, that's what it was. And I think it's up to the practitioner in order to, essentially to take the ownership of their training program and continue to update the things that might become inefficient at some point or another, or there might be a better way to do it. Like right now, using a lot of VBT, we want to train in this 1.2 to 3.0 spectrum on the speed spectrum for meters per second. And it's like, right now I'm doing a jump squat. In 4 years, there might be an easy way to hook it up to a dumbbell and make it something else or whatever it might be. But it's up to me to look for that and try to get that connected in all that way. I think a lot of the times people make the mistake of doing that without letting themselves getting too comfortable when it comes to some of those things. And if you go back to your underlying principles of what you believe in and what your program is, and like you said, not just the biomotor qualities or like those, strength, speed, explosive power, things like that. Like, what is your, like, I think it starts with like defining like what your job is. What is the goal of your department, right? When we say it's athletic performance, or we say it's sports performance, or we say it's strength and conditioning, whatever it is, that piece kind of determines what your principles will kind of lay down after that, right? Right. So, like sports performance, what is our overall goal? We want to prepare the athletes the best they can be in order to succeed in sport. And that might mean integrating more within the sports teams. That might mean doing a little bit less basic things all the time. Whereas, like an athletic performance or a physical preparation coach might be solely considered on, we want to make the most physically prepared athlete possible. And I think that kind of just sets your staff up and sets up your department to like do what it is intending to do, right? In sports performance, we're not just worried about only physically preparing them, but we want to have them most prepared for their game. So we use, a little bit more of an in-depth needs analysis. We integrate sports science such as GPS data, key metrics that relate to the sport in order to see if we can have some kind of dynamic correspondence, even though some people don't fucking believe in it because they're got their head up their ass. So like things like that can directly translate and correlate to increasing sport, like performance in the sport. That's our number one goal, right? That's what our mission statement kind of is. From there, then we have our principles. How do we achieve that goal, right? And I think then it becomes after those principles of, ground-based movement, injury. I don't want to say prevention because you can't prevent injury. Injury risk mitigation. And then you'll go into, well, how did those get done? Okay, well, now let's go into those biomotor qualities. Break it down a little bit more. Well, we want to have high-speed distance. What does high-speed distance look like? Looks like we have to sprint. We want to be able to be strong enough within our functional outputs to then be resilient to do that. But we want to have functional capacity to increase in strength and in injury resiliency. And then we go, okay, well, that's our principles. Now let's go down to our methods. How do we achieve those things? Do we rip sprint floats? Do we do sprint float sprint? Do we do flies? Do we do cleans? Do we do jumps? Do we do X, Y, Z? It just keeps breaking down. But I think a lot of people, they start at that method instead of starting up high and working your way down of like, what is our common goal, our mission? Okay, what are our what are our principles within that to achieve that? What are those biomotor qualities that are the most important for whatever sport or team that we're working with? Now, how do we achieve that in the most efficient and safest way possible? Um, and that bottom one, honestly, everyone gets wrapped up in it, but I think it's the least important out of all of them. Because there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. 5 or 6 of them are probably more ideal than the others, depending on whatever situation you have or environment that you're in. And if you get too fixated on a specific method, you're kind of losing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, I agree. I think you got to kind of evaluate people on the results, obviously, not even just like on field results, but like, are you seeing progress within some of like the KPIs that you see as valuable to that said sport? And just like the thought process of why I like this method versus the other one versus just like, oh, they do this, so they suck. They do this, so that's good
Yeah.
stuff. Like you gotta kind of judge by the outcomes to an extent. Um, so yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. Like the principles are always going to come first, and then from that, like you'll do your needs analysis, see what qualities are going to be more important for said sport, and then methods. Time of year is also going to play into it, obviously, and kind of the level of athlete you're dealing with. But um, yeah, it's interesting to think about like if you just think about like if you were the head of a department and like you needed some like structure or framework like okay, what do you think is important, what are going to be your main principles that you want your staff to kind of like revolve their training philosophy around, and does that change based on like the type of school you're at? Probably. I mean, if you have more access to like technology and stuff like that, more resources, more money, maybe you're going to integrate more sports science, more technology, more like testing and data into your principles just because you can, versus like at a smaller school where you don't, maybe you have like a jump mat and a pair of lasers, you can only gather so much data from that, only get so many metrics. So maybe, data informed, research informed, decision making within training falls a little bit lower simply because it's just a practicality thing at that point.
Yeah. And I think, like what you said, that kind of brings up a really good point. Like some places are going to have a lot more money and the ability to do a lot more. Unfortunately, it's not always the case where they will, where $2 in good intentions will probably be better than someone with an unlimited budget and an incompetency with the tools that they have available. And I'm not saying like as you get bigger, you'll always just have more money and you'll be less skillful. Um, but I think a
It's
lot
definitely a
of
risk though.
it
Honestly,
is
like
it
that's a
is a
real
big
that's a
risk.
real
Yeah.
risk.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to get at is like as that budget grows and the tools become more abundant and you don't really have to worry about how would I think creatively to get the same thing. I think there's a little bit of art that gets lost. Um, I look at a guy like Gabe. He's at a Division II school. He's got lasers, and I think he's got a jump mat. Right. I guarantee you, he has countless amounts of data points that he's collected over this, his couple months that he's been there now, in order to progress what he's doing with whatever sports science initiative he's taking on. Um, and that's just from the point of, like I said, $2 in good intentions. He's going to find out how to do more with less versus someone who might have 8 sets of force plates and they just use it to take a jump height. And jump height is like a good metric to take from a force plate depending on whatever it is. But there's all these other metrics that they might not be looking at or even caring about. It's like, well, he probably could have done this in a different way, a little bit less expensive way, that's for sure. Or you could be taking that data and utilizing it to further what you're impacting and looking into some of those things that might have a correlation to performance, whether it be on the court, the field, the track, the sand, the whatever. I'm trying to think of all the playing surfaces, and looking into some of that, and then walking back your training of saying, even like you look at like a sand volleyball type of team, and you're like, well, they don't really do a ton of like hard surface training. They're always in the sand. It's got a lot of gives. It's definitely going to be a little bit more muscular. Max force output might be great, but is our MRSI great? Okay, it's not, but we need to make them a better and more robust athlete. What do I change in my training in order to improve the MRSI on a counter movement jump? Um, and then you can see if that has a correlation. And you can test things out too. It doesn't always have to be only to further. Like that's that 90% that we've talked about a couple of times where, well, I'm going to improve XYZ and I want to see if this will help improve them too. So if I can get this number to go up and we see an improvement in their abilities, it might not improve their skill acquisition, but if it can improve athletic abilities and give them a bigger bandwidth for error to rely on raw athleticism, you're probably doing well as a practitioner because you're giving them a more complete, robust athlete that can have, again, more bandwidth to possibly make a mistake in skill. And if they keep up the skill work with it, well, now they're just all around better. I think you just see that a lot of times when everyone wants to make the biggest facility with the most tools and everything, and then they just kind of are a little stagnant. And unfortunately, it's the truth that just happens. We have 90 tools, and we've heard it thousands and thousands of times from people that we meet, cross paths with, even interns who have interned other places. And it's just like, well, they had a bunch of stuff and it just sat in a closet. It's like, well, what are they collecting it? Why are we not
Yeah.
using it?
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I remember at Simpson we had lasers, we had a couple jump mats, and we did have a couple Tendo units, and I think that was it. And like
Mm-hmm.
we kind of figured out how to do more with less. Like I was even doing like basically just like wellness questionnaires, like every time the kids would come into lift, and like, yeah, is it the most like accurate? But like, it's something it's
Gives
something
you
to look
something.
back on. Um, and then stuff like that. We did a few like readiness tests with the jump mat with like um where we do like PVC pipe behind the head. We do it like every Monday since they played like football team played a game on Saturday, and if they were within 10% of their best jump height, they were in the green, and then we had like different like cutoffs, like, oh, this person's in the yellow, this person's in the red, and then we would kind of talk to the coaches from there, and ideally like adjust the practice plan for that player, maybe get them a little less live reps, and like that worked honestly, and it was something that like it was easy to understand. It was one metric. It was jump height in inches, super easy to understand. It's within, it's not super, it's not
Invasive.
like rocket. Yeah, exactly. Like it's easy to test, it's quick to test, and I don't know, did that show us 100% with 100% accuracy whether that person was at risk for an injury? No, but I mean, nothing really does that. There's
Yeah.
probably things that get you a little bit closer, but like, especially with sports science, like it's still kind of coming of age. Like we're never really going to have, just all, you're never going to really be able to isolate a single metric, a single variable, and say that was the reason this person got injured,
Yeah.
because the system's just way too complex to ever be able to do that. And if you are thinking like that, I feel like you're just kind of I don't know, I want to say like an easy way out, but it's like you're just tired of like trying to think critically.
You just want a simple answer to say it's X and not have to
Yes.
worry or continuously, like, I don't want to say stress on the situation, but like work on it. Like I
Yeah,
look
just
at like
keep thinking.
yeah, it's like hamstring injuries. Like everyone, like the Nord board is a cool thing. It gives you this, but a lot of people are like so obsessed with like an asymmetry on a Nord board. Um, and the University of Wisconsin, they did a study, and actually Kel got me the study, so like shout out to him. But they found out the two biggest determinants for a hamstring soft tissue injury was of course, a previous injury.
Hmm.
Number two had nothing to do with asymmetry or anything about the musculature. Was the athlete over the age of 23? Those were the two biggest determinants of a soft tissue hamstring injury in that limb. Um, and they showed like the scatter chart of all the pre and post tests for everybody, and it was everywhere. They even like went in and talked about, how they tried to like angle this to see if like there was some kind of correlation. And there were guys who had a perfect symmetry or near perfect. There were athletes in there that ended up with literally a hamstring injury. There were some that had a massive asymmetry and nothing. Like that stuff. And I look at it in terms of like, I talk about track and field a lot, but I look at it in terms of track and field. Like that is the sport of asymmetry. Like some people, like they're going to train predominantly like accelerating off a split stance, and one of those legs is going to be harder. Is going to be a better pusher. It's going to be more skilled. You look at a guy like Ryan Krauser and look at the size of his hands that he throws shot put with. His throwing hand is like 1.5 times the size of his regular or his non-throwing hand. Those things occur in sport, and we can't look to say like, well, that's going to make him get injured. It's so much more complex, not necessarily complicated, but it's just so much more complex of a system that has to go, because everything integrates with everything. It's all one big fucking mess, to where it could all just pinpoint to one moment. Versus like, well, it's this, it's a simple answer. It's a simple answer. And there's 1,000 simple answers. No, those 1,000 simple answers all interact with each other. And then it's going to probably make something happen at some point.
Right. 100%. Yeah. I mean, I work with baseball now, and like talk about asymmetry. Like not many people are ambidextrous throwing, at least. Like you expect asymmetry, and I think trying to fix that, not going to say it's necessarily a waste of time, but like that's kind of like the name of the game. Like you wouldn't expect, like it'd be unreasonable to expect them to be symmetrical when, especially for like a pitcher, like you're throwing as hard as you can and you're only going to throw with one arm for pretty much everybody. Like, and even with like hitting too. I mean, unless you're like a switch hitter and you evenly bat from the left and the right side, which usually doesn't happen. Usually they're going to favor one side or the other, but they're going to be a little asymmetrical. And that's just kind of like that's an adaptation to playing the sport. If I'm being honest, that's how I see it.
Yeah. And that asymmetry might not even be a visible thing with like musculature size or pennation angle or like whatever it might be. It literally just might be a skill like a skill point in that direction, or like how fast they can sequence motor units, like because of the amount of times that they've done it. Like the adaptation is dictated by volume, and if they've done it for 10 years on their right side and they learn how to do it on their left side and they've done it for 5, their right is probably going to be a little bit more efficient in some way, shape, or form because they've had more years doing it.
Right. Yeah, I think I mean, shit, I'm left-handed. I've written with my left hand my whole life. I'm still like, if I try to write with my right hand, it's terrible. It always has been terrible. Like you can call that an asymmetry technically, but yet we're not, we're not getting our freaking panties in a bunch about that. So not to say that some of that stuff, like maybe if it's a hamstring and you have like a crazy asymmetry, like like a 30% asymmetry, okay, maybe need to take a look at it. But like if it's within a reasonable amount,
yeah,
I don't know.
Like I learned how to write with my left hand when I tore my pec on my right side. Technically, there's less of an asymmetry, but I'm gonna write with my right hand. I'm more efficient with it.
Yeah,
because I don't have to like constantly think about like writing the letter with my right hand as I do with my left.
right.
I can get it done. It's just
it's
not gonna look as good, and it's gonna take me a little bit longer, but it's possible.
Right.
I'm gonna favor one side that it's been my dominant hand for 20. At the time, it was like 22 years, 21 years.
Exactly.
Those things just happen. I think we get a little bit scared of something like that. I think as like a field versus like when you think about it in like just the most like layman's terms, like those happen all the time. It's just the way the game is, whether it's the game or life. Like there's going to be an asymmetry. That's fine. It's just mitigate that and work around it, try to elevate whatever the other, like whatever is lacking, of course, but like just know that it's never going to be absolutely perfect in any way, shape, or form. And it's not going to be the end all be all to solve all your problems by making someone symmetrical.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff.
I was interested in this, and I've always done a little bit of like density training within, myself as like a person and my athletes that I train, just because I think a little bit of density, whether it be low intensity, high intensity, whatever, but depending on the time of the year, some density training could be good for just repeat efforts and just gaining some ability to kind of train. But I got one for you, and I just wanted to give this to you. And I stole it from one of my buddies. He was doing it, and it's from like a little piece from like 531 Forever, which great book, all time. Just, hey, you got like a 10-minute rolling clock. You have to collect 50 reps. Break it up however you want, but you got to get it done. Like, that is insane. I did it with some single leg RDLs. Just like, hey, I think I did like 4 minutes. Got to get, I think it was like 16 reps at roughly like 75%. Just kind of break it up and go. But you got to get on both legs. So like, it seems a little dense. And number one, it was a great like break in training to just be like, I got to get this number of reps done, like break it up however I need to, versus like I have 2 sets of 5 or I have 3 sets of 4, 6 sets of 6. I have, 4x4, 4x5, whatever. It makes it a little bit more fun. I was definitely more intentful, I would say, like with the training that I was doing, because I was like, I have to see what I can get. If I can like front load a ton of this work, then depending on your NSCA book knowledge for people, it's like, oh, did I work into like the strength spectrum and now I'm into power, or am I, and then anyone else who's like kind of learned past that, it's like, well, now I'm under fatigue because I set some fatigue up in this. But it was super fun. And then my accessories, it was like, hey man, you got to get 50 reps of X, 50 reps of X, 50 reps of X. I have never, like, my accessories were upper body. I've never had such a juicy pump in my life. You would think, dude, I like went to shower, like looked at myself and like I could see like every vein in my bicep. I was like, oh my gosh. I almost sent you a picture.
Should have.
I thought it was you for a second. I was like, that looked huge.
No, dude, the density training, I'm a fan. I remember like we did a good amount of like EDT when I was at Simpson. I know Nick does, or at least when I was there, Nick did a decent amount of it with football, especially like towards the end of the summer, especially with kind of those maybe
Just
not like
Tabata.
quite EDT. Yeah, it was more of a spin off Tabata. I really liked those, but like I think it goes back to like shit. Like it's I mean giant sets. That's what they're called in some circles. Like, hey,
Yeah.
do you pick a certain weight, you pick a certain amount of reps, and you try to do it as quickly as you can, and then you can either progress that by doing the same exact thing, same weight, same reps, trying to get it in a lesser amount of time. You can do the same weight with more reps and trying to get it in the same time. You can do more weight with the same reps. Like you can kind of mess with the variables there. Like I'm a fan of that kind of stuff. Especially for, I don't know if it's something for maybe not for like beginner athletes, but I think you can kind of throw it in there like with like the EDT stuff if it's mostly like accessory movements, like more like GPP work early off season. That's when we utilized it a lot at a Simpson. We did usually EDT circuits with accessory movements towards the end of the training sessions on really all days we would have. And I think really as long as you're not doing like crazy like compounds, like if you want to do a giant set with one compound, fine. But like EDT, like if you have 3 or 4 exercises you're choosing from, like make them be mostly like single joint. Don't have a yes, like you don't want to be doing a freaking squat, then an RDL, then a freaking like you gotta keep it simple.
Keep it simple,
no,
stupid.
Yeah, but no, I'm a fan. Haven't really done a lot of it down here with the athletes, but like even like I've seen people doing it for like even like plyos. Like I remember that one time we were just fucking around on the jump mat, just doing jumps for like 30 minutes. We probably accumulated how many hundred
Yeah.
intensive ground contacts. But like, I would usually, and I still do, kind of program like specific sets and reps for like plyos, and like it kind of made me think like, should I just like give people like
You gotta
a
hit
certain
16 with
amount?
24 contacts.
Yeah, or like give them a certain amount of minutes. Like the minutes could get a little sloppy. Depends on kind of what you want there. But like,
Mhm.
yeah, just give me X amount of jumps, um, and then you could even kind of play with the variations. Like I just posted something about like variable rep sets, and I think that
Saw
stuff
that.
can be super helpful just for like exploratory means, like getting a little bit creative with stuff like that, especially like in preps, like we were talking about the other day, like just using your time you use for your performance preps as exploratory and like trying stuff that's a little bit different, like low risk but potentially high reward. So hey, like do I want you to do about like 10 plyos. I want you to do they all need to be vertical, but I want every single rep to look a little bit different. Change up, bilateral, unilateral, split stance, counter movement, non-counter movement, like stuff like that.
The other thing I was thinking about too is like variability. I think a lot of people are like very like they're scared. I don't want to say scared, but they're like weary of change within their program. Now I don't think you have to change everything every week or anything like that. But even just like adding alterations, like hey, we're gonna RDL for a couple weeks, then we're gonna do a snatch grip RDL, right? It changes a little bit of the load, changes it up. One of the biggest things that I see out of it is you just get like a coordination aspect of like constantly like relearning something. And now obviously like you kind of walk a razor's edge on it of you don't want to be too variable to where you never get stimulus out of anything, but having that variability in some of the training, especially on accessory movements, like it's such a good thing because like again, you just get motor learning, motor development, you get coordination aspects from it. Just like we talked about like with the preps, like just making a small change in a type of movement I think is worth it. And even if you don't get strength gains directly from one to the other, they're probably becoming more athletic just from a coordination aspect and like learning how to do that stuff and getting more familiar with different movement patterns or variations of movement patterns. And in reality, the actual movement is still the same. Like a snatch grip RDL and an RDL, pretty similar. You might get a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
hamstring stimulus and some upper back stimulus from a snatch grip, but whatever. Like, it's just an example. But it's like you have that, and I think some people are a little weary of like making a change because they're like, well, I can still get more out of this. Like you can, and you can come back to it. We're in early GPP off season. You got a lot of time. Go with it. See what you get.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think you kind of have to walk a fine line between like you said, changing it too early and leaving it long enough. Like I would say you want to do with compounds at least. I would like to see them done for at least probably 4 weeks. I usually plan in 4 week blocks, 4 to 6 weeks. But like if you can make a call like if you're still seeing like good progress as far as just like adding more weight to the bar or stuff like that, you can keep it in for another cycle, but then it's going to get stale at some point, and that's when you kind of have to know your progressions slash regressions and just
Mm-hmm.
like and I think as athletes get older and maybe they've been talking about college and they've been like in a program for a little bit, you kind of give them like more autonomy, like all right, you have choice of whatever, like bilateral hinge, and kind of let them pick what works for them. Just make sure, like, hey, for the next 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to do this, and then you're going to switch it up from there. So that's something that I think, yeah, I would agree that people get a little bit too stagnant sometimes. Like the only thing they do for squat the whole year. They only front squat the whole year, or they only split squat the whole year, or they only trap bar the whole year. They only, straight bar the whole year, so, like, etc. Like, some variation is good. I would say some movements are obviously more fatiguing than others and probably have a better place at certain times of the year away from the season versus in season, and just kind of knowing that. And obviously, like, everyone's going to have their personal preferences. It's going to depend on, if you have something that's going to take a lot more coaching and is a little bit more risky, so to say, and your like coach to athlete ratio isn't the greatest, like you're one coach with 35 people, then maybe you're going to pick something a little bit less technically, um, that needs a little less technical proficiency versus like if you're just working with a basketball team and you have 12 guys, maybe you can get a little bit more, I don't know, depending on what you want to, if you want to try to put Olympic lifts in there or like something like straight bar deadlifts where it's um, a little bit more tough to learn than just like a trap bar. Um, just kind of some thoughts on that.
I'd say so. Um, Speaking of trap bar, we'll kind of wrap it up around this. I've started to move away from it. And Evan, talking to him, he made a really good point, and then I started to really look into it of like the trap bar was kind of sold to the world as like a back saver, like a low back saver instead of a deadlift component. I think a lot of the times, just like due to like the nature of athletes trying to like, because they can obviously pull a little bit more weight on it, I think it can create more issues than it solves. You have to be very, very diligent on coaching it, in my opinion, and getting that slack pulled out of it prior to like performing any movements that if you miss one, it leaves an opening for a back issue. Um, and I've started to kind of work it away from some of my stuff. Like I still have trap bar pulls and some heavier kind of stuff, but in a more dynamic fashion. But obviously, like you got to coach. I think we give the equipment too much power. I think, and like, oh, it's good to go. They can just pull it up and go. Like I think it can cause some serious structural issues and like a low back, especially as fatigue starts to set in. Maybe
Yeah,
that's just
I no, I'm glad you said that because we're actually, you talk. I think because I think a lot of people think of the trap bar as a hinge. To me, it's more
a
so of
lot.
a squat, especially
Yeah.
a high handle trap bar. Like if you get a low handle trap bar, which like we had our guys do low handle trap bar, um, even during the season, and I like that a lot more. But it's still more of a squat, to be honest with you. Like it's still more of a squat, in my opinion.
We get a ton of knee
Yeah,
extension.
yeah, you're in a squat position. I'm glad you mentioned that because this is the right now we've been teaching the guys to deadlift on a straight bar, which is the first time that I've ever like programmed a straight bar for a team. I've seen it done in a team before, but I feel like I kind of got, whether it was just like, oh, I didn't like the people that were teaching me at the time, like weren't a huge fan of it. So I kind of followed suit and like, yeah, like it is a little bit, you hear people like, oh, hurting their back on a deadlift, but like, I do think that, I mean, that to me, that's a true hinge. That and like an RDL, obviously, it's more of a true hinge. And I think like while it's a little bit tougher to learn, I think like learning some of those more demanding, patterns that are a little bit tougher to learn, I think that's going to help them when they go back to like a trap bar. Like if you learn a trap bar and then try to learn a straight bar, it's probably going to be a little more difficult versus like if you know how to straight bar deadlift well, like a trap bar is going to be probably a little bit easier. And especially like the time of the year we are now, we're the furthest away we're going to be from games. Probably wouldn't do it in season unless we're doing like it for for speed, maybe off blocks. But I think at this point, and like I think that like foundational athletes should kind of learn as many of those main movement patterns, like even if it's like a back squat, even if I'm not necessarily like a huge fan of it. Um, learning all like the main movements, back squat, front squat, straight bar deadlift, your hinge, military press, chin ups, stuff like that. And then you can kind of see how they handle it from there. Obviously, anthropometrics is going to play a role as well. Having like a 6'5" guy straight bar from the ground probably is going to be a little bit more difficult. But no, I'm glad you said that, because I've been kind of thinking about that as well. Like, one, like it's not a true hinge. Two, yeah, I think being able to like slack the bar, and because you can just lift so much damn weight, like it's easy to get a little bit greedy on it too.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, I'm not gonna say it doesn't like induce adaptation. Like, any exercise can induce adaptation if you load it enough and you do it well. But like, I'm rarely sore after trap bar deadlifts unless it's maybe a low handle a little bit more. Unless,
Like the limited range of motion.
yeah, you're
Uh,
just not getting a lot of range.
yeah, you probably like you probably get motor unit recruitment with like a high load on it, or depending on
Right.
how fast the bar moves. But like, especially if you're in like early off season, like you guys are, like it's okay that we get some soreness because we're probably getting some musculature change versus like just central nervous system stimulus. And at that point, like especially in a developmental like academy like you're at, or I look at it like a foundational level athlete in like a college setting, you kind of want that soreness because that soreness is going to drive muscular adaptation. It's likely caused by muscular tissue damage, which will lead to hypertrophy as long as we eat enough.
Exactly. And they're at the point where they're really not doing a ton of skill work. Like, we have two groups going right now. One that is playing in some games. We don't have them on the same program. They're not doing the straight bar deadlift. But the team that isn't, they're doing very little skill work. So like, I feel like pretty comfortable. The groups are smaller. Like, there's never more than 4 people doing a set at a time, and there's 2 coaches. So that's super good coaches. Like, we have 4 racks, and then 2 coaches on the floor. We can definitely coach that up really well. So yeah, I was thinking about that too. Like, they kind of get, I don't know, people like to demonize exercises and kind of take like one side of the spectrum or the other. When, like we've talked about before, like,
Falls in the
it's not
middle.
black and white. It's always gray. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, man, I love that idea behind it, and it's like just expose them to something. Let's get them a little sore. It's okay if they're sore right now, because you're gonna pull off and get them obviously fresh and in season. But the other thing too is like obviously when you're in season training, you back off a little bit. You're not necessarily peaking,
Hmm.
because you're not like stopwatch sports is you'll peak. For field sports where there's a little more chaos, you don't peak. You just kind of pull back into hitting your minimal effective volumes instead of your
Right.
maximal recoverable volumes. Um, that MRV versus MEV stuff like that. The biggest thing I see though is like a lot of the times, and we've all made this mistake. I think like you're so scared you don't
You don't
want
want
to
to be
push.
the straight coach that gets someone hurt.
Yeah,
That's
you
like
just don't want to be that guy,
that's
or
like the
girl,
worst thing
person.
that could ever happen to you.
Yeah, but you can't pull back from. You have to have something to pull back from, or if you're peaking, you have to have something to peak from. If we don't train hard enough to induce something, we can't pull away from that. Like the only other difference is just not do anything.
Right. You
There's
can't
a
treat athletes like they're fragile. At least not all the
yeah,
time.
exactly, because a lot of the times in these sports, they're doing things with their body, whether it be contacts, whether that be jumps, sprints, dives, tumbling, rolling, all
Way
that.
more
Like,
demanding than what you could ever do in the weight room. So
no,
you're doing them a disservice by not kind of pushing the needle a little bit in the preparation stage.
exactly. And you got to go for it. And I think if you go for it, you'll be really pleased. As long as you do it smart, you'll be really pleased with the results. And that, when you do back off and they're in that season and you're hitting that MEV and they're able to sustain what they've built over that period of time, or at least to minimal drop offs on power outputs, relative strength. You can just hit your residuals as you need to, depending on your calendar year and your game schedule. Your results will likely be better. And that's all that matters is we see continuous improvement.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. That was a great one. I love that.
Yeah,
That was a
that
great
was a
talk.
fucking that was a fucking banger there. Provoking thoughts. See, we're more than
Yeah.
just caffeine
Just
addicted.
drinks.
Yeah, we're more than just energy drinks. there's a little something going on in the brain once in a while.
Every once in a while, the juices do flow.
That's right.
Um, we'll wrap this up here, but I want to this. I'm always hesitant on hydration drinks. Are they enough electrolytes? Are they overly sweet? Are they functional in the way that like you can drink this during a hard workout and not want to throw up? This flavor of this energy drink, I will vouch that I've tested it and like done a hard workout where I was like, this could be like a throw up, like on an air bike in a hot day. Like was able to have this, sip it, pound it, not feel like I'm gonna throw up. I would like to see more sodium. I get why they didn't. Just give me 500 milligrams of sodium, and this is damn near perfect hydration drink. But with that being said, the lemon lime flavor, it's delicious. It's mild, semi-sweet. It's not caffeinated, which I think like if someone does caffeinated, like something like that, it's kind of a cop out. Like they're just going to be like, here's 80 milligrams or 100 milligrams. Like it's not enough. It's not really serving a purpose. I'm going to go 8.5.
Okay, nice.
8.5.
And this is kind of, obviously it's in kind of a category of its own, but still very good. And I mean, we're big fans of Ghost on this channel. So it's really like for me, like Gorilla Mind and Ghost are like my go-to like energy drinks, just with everything they offer, like holistic, holistic package deal. Yeah, like obviously, like I'm always gonna love like the Monster Ultra series, and Rams are freaking fire. But, like, yeah, Ghost does it well. So no, that's good. I'm gonna have to pick one of those up when I get back stateside. I think I've tried this one before. This is probably this citrus twist flavor of this caffeine ice is probably. I think this is probably my favorite flavor. It's in this and then the cherry vanilla one. It just kind of tastes like a Sprite. So it's just like a slightly caffeinated Sprite. So not bad. I know I've rated it before, but Old Faithful down here.
Need it.
Yep. So we'll go ahead and I'll wrap this one up for this week. Stay tuned. We were just talking before this about potentially getting some guests lined up so we can talk a little bit more about performance from different perspectives. Probably talk some energy drinks as well, but kind of just trying to take that next step as far as the podcast and kind of what we want out of it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Find us on social media. I'm on Instagram at French_fit40.
I am at B Shakuski, BSZUTKOWSKI.
That's right. And then BevBoys.tv on Instagram for the Bev Boys page. We're going to start posting a little bit more short form content on there, especially when we get the guests on there. So make sure to follow us on there. BevBoys.com if you want to buy a shirt. You should definitely buy a shirt. So support the boys. And yeah, thank y'all for watching. YouTube. We're on Spotify now. Check us out. We'll see you next time. Peace. Fuck yeah. That was a bang.